Most cars don't wear out. They get killed slowly, quietly, by the exact advice printed in the owner's manual and repeated at every dealership counter. I've spent more than 20 years under the hoods of over 3,000 cars, and I'll tell you straight, the difference between an engine that quits at 130,000 miles and one that rolls past 500,000 has almost nothing to do with luck. It comes down to 12 habits, most of them things your dealer quietly hopes you never figure out. The most important one sits at number 1, and I want you to stay for it because it costs nothing, takes about 30 seconds, and almost no mechanic will ever mention it. There's no part to sell and no labor to bill. Do these 12 things, and 500,000 miles stops being a fantasy. It becomes a maintenance schedule. Let's start at number 12. Number 12. Keep your tires honest. Tires are the only part of your car touching the road, and when they're low or worn unevenly, the damage doesn't stop at the rubber. A tire running 10 pounds under pressure builds heat and forces your engine to pull harder for every mile, which drinks fuel and loads your wheel bearings and suspension years before their time. Here's what the quick lube shops won't tell you. There's no real money in tire care for them, so they let you roll out on tires, scrubbing themselves bald on one edge while they upsell a cabin filter you didn't need. I've watched this pattern for 2 decades. The cars with tires rotated on schedule have steering and suspension that look 10 years younger than the ones whose owners never touched them. The ball joints, tie rod ends, and bearings all wear in lockstep with how the tires were treated. The fix costs almost nothing. Check your pressure cold once a month with a $3 gauge, set it to the number on the sticker inside your driver's door rather than the one stamped on the tire, and rotate every 6,000 miles. Quick question. Drop a comment and tell me honestly, when did you last put a gauge on your tires instead of just glancing at them? Be honest. Number 11. Wash what you can't see. You can keep an engine running forever and still lose the car to rust. Road salt and the grime that cakes onto your undercarriage all winter eat through brake lines, fuel lines, and eventually the frame itself. And by the time you spot a bubble of orange, the corrosion has been working from the inside out for a year or more. Here's what nobody at the dealership will tell you, because a rotted out car means you come back to buy a new one. In the salt belt, it isn't the motor that kills most cars. It's the structure rusting out from under a perfectly good engine. A mail carrier came in from Buffalo a few winters back driving a 2014 Honda CR-V that ran like a watch. But the brake lines had corroded through, and the rear subframe was so far gone, the shop next door wouldn't pass it for inspection. Undoing the salt damage ran her $2,470, and the engine underneath would have gone another 200,000 miles easy. The fix is almost insultingly simple. Once or twice a month through winter, run the car through a wash with an undercarriage rinse, or spend 10 minutes with a garden hose aimed up under the rocker panels and wheel wells. Salt that gets rinsed off can't eat what it can't sit on. Number 10. Stop running it down to fumes. That habit of driving until the low fuel light glares at you and then squeezing out a few more miles is doing something you can't see, and it's expensive. On almost every modern car, the fuel pump lives inside the tank, cooled and lubricated by sitting submerged in fuel. Run the tank to the bottom over and over and you leave that pump working hard in open air, overheating, while it sucks up the sediment and water that settle at the very bottom. The debris meant to stay below the pickup. Most drivers think they're gambling with getting stranded. Really, they're slowly cooking a part that costs real money. 2 Toyota Corollas came through my bay the same month, both around 140,000 miles. One belonged to a fellow who never let it drop below half a tank, and his original pump still hummed quiet as the day it left the factory. The other had been run to the warning light for years until the pump whined, then failed, leaving its owner stranded on a Tuesday facing a $645 repair, plus the tow. Same car, same mileage, and the only variable was a needle one man let dip and the other didn't. Make it a rule. Fill up at a quarter tank and treat that line like it reads empty. A fuel pump at least warns you with a whine. The next habit protects you from failures that give no warning at all. Number 9. Treat small symptoms like early warnings. A new tick from the engine, a faint sweet smell, a dime-sized spot of fluid on the driveway. These aren't annoyances to wait out. They're your car telling you something is failing while it's still cheap to catch. A pinhole coolant leak that costs almost nothing to seal today becomes a warped head once it drains the system on a hot afternoon, and a small oil weep ignored long enough starves a bearing and takes the bottom end with it. People wait because the car still drives fine, and that assumption is exactly what turns a minor repair into a major one. According to the Car Care Council, a large share of the vehicles on the road are driving around with at least one maintenance item already overdue. Small problems compounding into the breakdowns that strand people and total out healthy cars. The habit that saves you is boring and powerful. The day you notice a new noise, smell, or spot, you get it looked at that week, not next season. Catching the leak while it's a whisper is the difference between a $38 hose clamp and a $3,260 engine teardown. That spot on the driveway is at least something you can see. The next part hides behind a cover and does its job perfectly right up until the second it doesn't, and when it lets go, it can take half the engine with it. Number 8. Replace your belts before they decide to quit. Somewhere in your engine is a belt that controls whether the whole thing lives or dies, and most drivers never think about it until it's lying in pieces on the highway. If your car uses a timing belt and it snaps while you're driving, the pistons and valves that were moving in perfect choreography suddenly collide. On an interference engine, a snapped belt is often a death sentence for the motor. The serpentine belt out front is less dramatic, but no kinder. When it goes, you lose your charging system, power steering, and water pump all at once, usually miles from anywhere. Manufacturers bury the replacement interval deep in the schedule because a belt failure tends to land right after the warranty's gone, and a new engine sells more cars than a $30 belt ever will. A school bus driver from outside Cleveland put 210,000 miles on a 2011 Toyota Camry and never touched the timing belt. It let go on the interstate, valves met pistons, and the rebuild came back at $4,390 for a job that would have run her about $620 on time. Find your timing belt interval in the manual, usually between 90,000 and 105,000 miles, and replace it on schedule whether it looks worn or not. By the time a timing belt looks bad, you're already on borrowed time. That covers the parts you can point to. From here, we move into the fluids and driving habits that do the real work, and the closer we get to number 1, the more it costs you to keep ignoring it. Number 7. Test the one fluid nobody tests. Brake fluid is the most ignored fluid in your car, and it's quietly working against you right now. It's hygroscopic. It pulls moisture out of the air through the seals over time, and that water does two ugly things. It drops the fluid's boiling point so your brakes fade and go soft under hard use, and it corrodes your caliper's master cylinder and ABS unit from the inside. Here's the part that should bother you. Brake fluid almost never shows up on a quick lube menu and rarely gets mentioned at the dealer until something's already wrong. So let me put the question right on you. Think about the last time anyone tested your brake fluid for moisture. If you can't remember it ever happening, that's your answer. And there's a real chance the fluid in your lines is already past the point where it protects you. A flush runs about $119 and takes under an hour, and skipping it long enough is how a sealed hydraulic system becomes a $1,340 caliper and ABS repair. Flush it every 2 to 3 years, no exceptions. Here's where it gets strange. The next fluid does the most thankless job in the engine, and most people never touch it for one reason. It still looks fine right up until the day it isn't. Number 6. Flush the coolant before it turns on you. Coolant doesn't just keep your engine from boiling over, it carries a package of additives that stop the cooling system from corroding, and those additives wear out. Old coolant turns acidic and conductive, and once that happens, it quietly eats your water pump, radiator, heater core, and the metal around the head gasket, setting up the failure that leaves you on the shoulder with steam pouring from under the hood. Most drivers only think about coolant the day the gauge climbs into the red, and by then, the damage is done. I've opened hundreds of cooling systems, and the difference is impossible to miss. The ones serviced on schedule come apart clean, with bright passages and an impeller that still spins true, while the ones running decade-old coolant are full of brown sludge and scale, the impeller blades eaten down to nubs. A flush costs around $149 and takes an hour, and that hour stands between you and the overheating event that warps ahead. Do it on the manual's interval, usually every 5 years or 60,000 miles, and don't let a shop talk you into stretching it. That flush looks cheap next to a water pump, but downright free next to the 4-figure repair waiting at the next habit, where a fluid you were told to leave alone forever is busy destroying the most expensive component in your drivetrain. Number 5. Ignore the words lifetime fluid. Ask a dealership about your transmission fluid, and there's a good chance you'll hear it's filled for life and never needs changing. That phrase has cost more people their transmissions than almost any sentence in the car world. Automatic transmission fluid lubricates, cools, and acts as the hydraulic muscle that shifts the gears, and like any oil, it breaks down, burns, and loads up with clutch material the longer it runs. What lifetime really means is the lifetime of the warranty, not the car. Two Honda Accords landed in my shop the same week, both at 112,000 miles. One had its fluid serviced at 40,000 and again at 80, and it shifted crisp as new. The other ran the original fluid the dealer swore would last forever, slipped on the 2 to 3 upshift, smelled faintly burnt, and sat half a year from a $3,940 rebuild. Same model, same mileage, one variable. The fix is a fluid and filter service around $215 every 30 to 60,000 miles, and it's the best money you'll spend on the car. Quick reminder while we're here, if this is saving you money, hit that subscribe button now. It helps us keep making videos like this one, because the next habit costs nothing at all, and you can start it the moment you turn the key. Number 4, don't let it live on short trips. This one surprises people because it sounds backwards. A car that only drives a few minutes at a time can wear out faster than one piling on highway miles. Start a cold engine and shut it off before it reaches operating temperature, and the fuel and water vapor that form during combustion condense inside instead of burning off, mixing into the oil to create acids and sludge that grind at bearings and varnish the motor. The battery never fully recharges on a 2-mile hop, and the exhaust fills with condensation that rots it from the inside. Most people assume low mileage means a healthy engine, when a short trip car can be in rougher shape than one with twice the miles that gets warmed up properly. A home health aide from Minneapolis brought me a 2013 Chevy Malibu with barely 70,000 miles, and I expected it pristine. Instead, the oil was thick as pudding, and the underside of the valve cover was caked in sludge from years of 5-minute drives between patients in the cold, and undoing the damage ran her $1,180 on a car that should have been barely broken in. The fix is almost pleasant. Once or twice a week, take it on a drive long enough to reach full temperature and hold it there for 15 or 20 minutes, which boils off the moisture. Skip it too long and the damage is already piling up with every cold mile, while the odometer fools you into thinking you've been gentle. Number 3, drive like you're carrying a full cup of coffee. Of every habit on this list, how you drive may matter more than anything you ever pour into the car. Hard acceleration, slamming the brakes, riding them down long hills, launching from every light, all of it multiplies the heat and stress running through your engine, transmission, brakes, and tires, and heat ages a car faster than miles ever do. The driver who treats throttle and brake like on-off switches pays for it in every system at once. According to the Department of Energy, aggressive driving can sharply lower your fuel economy, and the same forces burning that fuel are hammering the mechanical parts just as hard. The fix doesn't cost $1. Ease onto the throttle, look far enough up the road to coast toward red lights instead of charging them, and brake gently and early. You'll save fuel while extending the life of nearly every moving part, paying back the $470 a year a heavy foot can cost you. Drive like there's a full cup of coffee on the dash, and the whole car lasts longer. And everything I've shown you still comes second to the one habit waiting at number 1, the 30-second move that costs nothing, and that almost no mechanic will ever tell you about, because it's the difference between an engine that quits early and one that simply refuses to die. Number 2. Change the oil before the manual tells you to. Engine oil is the closest thing your car has to blood, and the biggest lie in modern car ownership is the 10,000-mile oil change. Manufacturers stretch those intervals out for one reason that has nothing to do with your engine. A car that needs service less often looks cheaper to own on the showroom sticker, and that sells cars, but oil doesn't read the brochure. As it works, it shears down, its additives deplete, and it turns from a protective film into an abrasive sludge that wears bearings, scores the cam, and stretches the timing chain, especially in heat, towing, or stop-and-go traffic. A delivery driver from Phoenix ran a 2010 Toyota Tacoma on the dealer's 10,000-mile schedule through years of desert heat. Sure, he was doing everything right. The oil couldn't survive that long in that climate. The engine sludged up and spun a bearing, and replacing the motor cost him $5,260, all to save a handful of $79 oil changes. Run full synthetic with a quality filter and change it every 5,000 miles or sooner in heat, towing, or traffic, and ignore the stretched interval no matter what the dashminder says. Clean oil is the cheapest insurance in the car, and it sets up number 1 perfectly, because the most expensive damage oil takes isn't from being old. It's from those first seconds after a cold start, before the oil has reached the parts that need it, which is exactly the 30-second secret I promised you at the very beginning. Number 1. Give it 30 seconds before you move. Here it is, the habit that does more to push an engine past 500,000 miles than anything else on this list, and it costs you absolutely nothing. Overnight, almost all the oil in your engine drains down into the pan, leaving the cam, lifters, bearings, and cylinder walls coated in nothing but a thin, aging film. The moment you turn the key, those parts are moving against each other with barely any oil between them, and they stay that way for the few seconds it takes the pump to build pressure and push fresh oil to the top of the engine. That brief window, repeated at every cold start, is where the majority of all engine wear in a car's life actually happens. Not on the highway, not under load, but in the first seconds of a cold morning. Almost no mechanic will ever tell you this, for one simple reason: there's no part to sell and no labor to bill. I've pulled the valve cover on hundreds of high-mileage engines, and the ones given those few seconds to build oil pressure before being driven look like a different machine than the ones that weren't. Not slightly different. Completely different. The cam lobes on a respected engine are still sharp past 300,000 miles, while the cam in an engine that was fired up and immediately stomped on is scored, pitted, and worn flat, often before it sees 130,000. Same engine, same factory, two completely different fates, decided in 30-second increments over years. Those owners weren't careless, they just never knew the rule, and plenty ended up paying for a $4,720 short block when half a minute of patience each morning would have made all the difference. So here's the whole fix, free and final. After you start the car, give it about 30 seconds to idle before you drop it into gear, and for the first few minutes, keep the throttle light and the revs low until the temperature needle lifts off cold. That's it. No tools, no products, no shop visit, just 30 seconds between the key in the road and an engine that outlasts the car wrapped around it. So there's your roadmap to 500,000 miles, and not one of these 12 habits asks you to be a mechanic. Keep the tires honest, rinse the salt away, never run it to fumes, chase small symptoms early, replace the belts on time, flush the brake fluid and coolant, service the transmission, give it real drives, drive it smooth, change the oil before the manual says to, and above all, give it those 30 seconds every morning. Here's my challenge. Pick just 3 of these you're not doing yet and start them this week. Not all 12, just 3, because 3 real habits beat 12 good intentions every time. If you want to know which 3 matter most for the way you drive, I broke exactly that down in the video on the left, ranking every habit by how much engine life it actually buys you. Click it and I'll see you there. And if this saved you money today, hit subscribe so the next one finds you too.